So let me just go ahead and introduce Jean Marie from PFLAG. And Jean Marie will tell you all about her, but she's just a wonderful trainer in this whole area of how do we bring along allies. And I'm really excited to have Jean Marie here to kind of kick us off.
Thank you, Melissa, and hi, everybody. I'm Jean Marie Navetta. I'm the Director of Equality Partnerships and Communications at PFLAG National, and I'll tell you a little bit about that in a minute. PFLAG National is all over the country, but our national office is based in Washington, D.C., although I now work out of San Francisco, California. And actually, my email is up there if anybody wants to reach me at the end of this, as well as PFLAG's URL, which is pflag.org. To quickly tell you a little bit about PFLAG, we are kind of that original storytelling kind of organization. PFLAG started with a mom, and there's a picture of her on the screen right now, and her name is Jean Manford. And to make her very long and amazing story kind of short, Jean had 2 kids. Her son was gay, her daughter was straight, and she recognized that life was very different for her son than it was for her daughter, and she wanted to start talking about it. And so she did, and she started speaking to the press, and she started speaking to other parents, and eventually it led to the formation of PFLAG, which is Parents, Families, and Friends of Lesbians and Gays. We started in 1973 with a couple of people in a church basement, and today we have over 250 affiliates and chapters across the country. And we have a 3-part mission of education, support, and advocacy. PFLAG has very much been sort of the organization that a lot of people have seen kind of as the straight voice in the LGBT movement, but a lot of those straight voices have been family voices, you know, parents and brothers and sisters who want to support their LGBT family. And over the past few years, PFLAG noticed that there are a lot of allies out there, people who don't have that family connection, but really want to become engaged in the fight for equality. And so we created the program that I work on, which is called Straight for Equality, and I'll tell you a little bit about that in a minute. But starting to think about where we are today, I want to bring your attention to, you know, that a lot of progress has been made out there for LGBT people. And the slide that I have up right now from the Movement Advancement Progress sort of looks at a decade of progress. And we've had some really amazing changes happen over even the last 10 years, and much of this has happened because of the involvement of straight allies working alongside LGBT people. I mean, we've had more states banning discrimination based on both sexual orientation and gender identity, more safe schools laws, more GLBT elected officials out there, more people who think that being gay is okay. And this is tremendous, tremendous progress that we've been seeing around the country, and for that matter, around the world. And again, I think a lot of that's happened because of LGBT people and their straight allies telling their stories about why equality matters to them on a personal level and how it affects us every single day. And this really speaks to that amazing combination of both policy work and personal stories. And speaking of personal stories, one of the other really great things that we're realizing is that right now in this world, and particularly in this country, more people say that they personally know someone who is LGBT than ever before. Right now, the statistic actually as of 2 years ago was that 7 in 10 people in the United States say that they personally know someone who is LGBT. And at PFLAG, we always like to say that the other 3 just don't know it yet. It's only a matter of time. So there's a lot of visibility, and there's been a lot of progress out there, but there's also some serious challenges that still remain. You know, in spite of all of those law changes and in spite of all those people who say, yes, I know somebody and I'm friends with somebody who's LGBT, here's what it still looks like in the country. We still have a Defense of Marriage Act. We still have tremendous problems with school bullying and harassment. There's still no fully inclusive non-discrimination act out there. Challenges when it comes to adoption and foster care. Don't ask, don't tell is tragically still in effect. LGBT people are rejected by their faith communities all the time, and there are still big health care disparities, and those are just sort of the big pieces. So what we're looking at is, in spite of legislative progress and in spite of visibility, we still need a lot more help. And the only way we're going to start changing these trends is if we get more straight allies, more allies who are willing to work through their challenges around these issues, and who are willing to speak up because we can't achieve equality alone. And for many of us, this means engaging new allies, sometimes people who we didn't think could be our allies. But we often know that allies, we can find new allies all over the place. But in order to find them, we sometimes have to figure out what is it that keeps people from being allies. And at this point, I want to actually turn it over to everybody who's on the call. Right now on your screen, you should see our first poll question of this call, which is, what do you think is the biggest barrier out there that keeps allies or potential allies in the closet? Why don't you think that people actually are supportive? And I see that people are starting to put their answers in right now. And we're going to just give it another couple of seconds to let everybody answer. So the possibilities are, do you think it's about religion? Do you think people are afraid of being considered to be gay? Do you think it's that people are homophobic, that they want to avoid controversy, or they don't know enough? What's the top reason? So anyone who hasn't answered, please continue to put your answers in there. We're almost there. Because actually identifying what these reasons are actually will help us sort of see what our next steps are in trying to educate and engage new allies. Well, I'm looking at the responses right now. And if you take a look, you can see where we are. From the people on this call, the majority of people have said that everyone, a lot of people just want to avoid controversy. After that, we see that people are afraid that other people will think they're gay if they speak on this issue. They don't know enough, and perhaps they have what they feel are some dumb questions to ask and don't know where to ask them is right up there. Religion is definitely coming up as a result. And as you can see, and I'm not very excited to see this, we're recognizing that maybe homophobia isn't the top reason that people don't support equality. And the kind of neat thing about what we're seeing from results like this is that actually the other issues here, religion and being afraid of being labeled gay or wanting to avoid controversy, are things that we as existing allies and as LGBT people who are out there can help people through. These are things that we can solve and things we can provide solutions to new allies on, so we can engage those allies and really empower them to start taking action. And actually, I'm excited to say that the results that the people who were on this call today gave are actually what PFLAG has found in our research over the past few years. That time and time again when we do polling around this issue, we find that the #1 reason that people are afraid about talking about this is they don't want to get into arguments and they don't like controversy. After that, religion, the fear of being labeled gay, and that they don't know enough about the issue. So again, these are all barriers that allies out there are saying that they have, and these are barriers that we can help people along with, but especially if we speak to them in a different way and maybe change our strategies up a little bit. And I'm going to tell you about maybe how you can try doing that, and everybody else on this call is going to talk about it too. But before I go any further, I want to give you 2 more quick statistics. The first one is this, and it's about religion, because many of us are really challenged by the issue of religion and how it plays into LGBT acceptance or rejection. But one of the neat things that we're really seeing at PFLAG is that this trend is beginning to change. 2 years ago or 3 years ago, we did polling and asked people, how does religion influence your willingness to speak up on behalf of LGBTs when you hear something bad? And more people, said, my religion keeps me from saying anything, than it does. But when we did the polling 2 years later, we found that more and more people are saying, I speak up positively in favor of equality because of my religion. And to us, this should be a constant reminder that sometimes those people who we've written off are those people who could be our greatest allies. So this is a journey for new allies as well as those of us who are engaged in the fight already. And I want to give you one quick last statistic. That polling that PFLAG has been doing for a few years, here's the number that always bothers me. We find, and this happened in 2007 and in 2009, only 2% of straight people that we polled across the country said that an LGBT person actually asked them to speak up when they hear something wrong. So this says to us, we actually need to start doing work on our part to engage these allies. People are out there waiting to take action, but we need to help them along. So what does this actually mean for us? Well, it means a few things. The first thing that I think that it means is we need to extend a really big invitation to new potential allies. That means that maybe people who you've never had a conversation with about why equality matters, you need to start talking to. And sometimes it's tough, and I know it, because it's scary to talk to those people who we don't know how they're going to respond. But if we have conversations with people and tell them our stories and talk about why equality matters on a personal level, and then we help them see ways that they can become engaged, we can start creating new allies that will help us create those changes that still are lingering out there. I also ask you to start thinking about maybe how we define the idea of who our allies are. Rather than making allies a group of people who can fit into a checklist that we've created of what they need to do to be good people, maybe we need to realize that allies can come in a lot of different forms, and that allies are people who are willing to learn more. Maybe they don't know everything. Maybe they still have some dumb questions, but this makes them allies, and they're willing to ask those questions. Allies are people who, are willing to face the barriers that they have to coming out as allies, and, are willing to find lots of different ways to be supportive. So maybe they don't support every legislative effort that we have, but maybe if we keep walking alongside with them, eventually they will. So I encourage you to think about allies broadly so we can start, bringing more people into our circle. And one of the tools that we use at PFLAG is we sort of have an ally spectrum, and I have it up on the screen right now. And you can see that we think that allies are everybody who, are just willing to listen to our conversations and maybe aren't on board with us yet, to those who become more comfortable in having the conversations themselves. Some of the conversations, that are tough, some of those allies eventually, if we continue to educate them and walk alongside with them, they'll become those people who are willing to intervene in difficult situations. Those people who are willing to join our, our organizations, grassroots and big national organizations too. And eventually we hope that if we continue to educate our allies and listen to their challenges and work with them, they will be those people who are going to Washington with us and creating, policy change that really needs to happen. But in order for this to happen, we also need to sort of check our assumptions about people at the door too. So many of us have been hurt by those who we've tried to reach out to and who have rejected us, but maybe we need to rethink our conversations. And I think, the No Dumb Questions film was a perfect example of where sometimes, our first conversations are going to be tough and they're going to be a little bit difficult, but if we continue to stick with people, we really can make some progress. So in reaching out to new allies, I encourage you to check your assumptions about people at the door. So just because, for example, somebody goes to church doesn't mean they're not, willing to listen to our message. And maybe political stuff can't be the first condition for being an ally. Maybe it's just somebody who's willing to actually start having conversations. And we need to accept that not all allies are the same. Maybe they don't fit into the definition we originally had in our heads of them. But if they're those people who are going to intervene, across the board and are going to start conversations and tell their stories and start creating change where they are, they're really, really important people. And I think that when we do this, there's a lot of stuff that we can get out of it. First of all, we don't define people and shove them into boxes. Second, it lets people to start becoming engaged where they are right now. Third, it lets us expand those people to realize that they're part of our community, even if they're not super political people quite yet, and it opens up new possibilities for us to work. So our challenge, if we're willing to accept it, is we need to start inviting new people, having those conversations with people we haven't talked to in the past, and make them realize that they're invited to ask their dumb questions maybe and start talking to us. We need to listen to what they're struggling with and walk alongside them on their journey to becoming better allies. We need to show them ways that they can take action, from the really big political things to maybe how to deal when somebody tells a gay joke. And we need to let them really be out and proud allies. So how do we do that? First of all, extend the invitation to allies. Let your friends know that it really does help when they tell their stories. And it does help when they intervene in situations, and it does help, frankly, when they vote, too. We need to start thinking about our own assumptions and putting them in check, because it colors the way we approach new people. Adjust our expectations and recognize that allies have a coming out process too, in the same way that LGBT people do. And it starts quietly, but it can get pretty loud and powerful if we continue to work with it. We need to stick with them, And we need to provide them with resources that were created for allies to get strong. Great films and great tools, and I'll tell you a couple of those in a minute. We need to continue to encourage them as they start coming out and recognize that it's tough for them too. And we need to be persistent, but with a lot of kindness, and recognize that in the same way people were gentle with us in our coming out process, we need to sometimes be gentle with our allies, because in the end, it pays off. So quickly, I just want to introduce you to a couple of tools if you haven't ever seen them before. The project that I work on is called Straight for Equality, and we have a couple of things. We have a great website, which is straightforequality.org. We even have the Straight Ally Pledge that people can take. We also offer 2 publications that are up there, the original Guide to Being a Straight Ally and Straight for Equality in Healthcare, and those are both totally free downloads. And I really encourage you to download them and pass them along to somebody who you want to start a conversation with. Hopefully you'll find them useful and a little bit amusing too, and a new way to look at this. And, before I turn this over to our next speaker, I really want to share one last quote with you, and this is from one of our former national PFLAG presidents, and he always used to talk about the power of telling our stories to people who we don't necessarily talk to. Telling your story to somebody new who you've never thought you could tell your story to, and he said that every time we tell our truth, we are creating a world where the sense that there is a shame in being LGBT or having a child or loved one who is becomes less pervasive. When we tell our stories, especially to those new allies and especially to the ones who we didn't think could ever be with us, we are changing the world. So I just want to thank everybody for being on this call. Thank you so much for everything that you're doing. I'm just so proud of what's happening in this movement. And I will definitely be around if anybody has any questions. But again, we're pflag.org or straightforequality.org.
Jean Marie, thank you so much. That was wonderful.